How do we bring prosperity to Chattanooga and Hamilton County and areas around it? By letting the market work. The market is comprised of thousands of people just like you, my listener here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. Thousands of people like you making decisions about what is in your interest. Now, the author of a fine book that came out in 1776, Adam Smith, talks about self-interest not as something that's evil, not as something to be apologized for and repented of, but self-interest is another way of looking at the marketplace, how every actor seeking his own benefit, in fact, works for the benefit of the whole. Now, you say, well, how is that possible? We know that if we have predatory capitalists out there working, it's always for them, and they don't care about the damage they cause to others, whether with shoddy products or inside scoops or private connections with government officials and secure contracts and so on, with non-bid contracts and the like. These are sometimes pictures of the market not working effectively. But on the whole, a marketplace that does not have special players who have special favor and unique powers in law, that marketplace will work to bring about the best for the most. Okay, that is what the marketplace does. Whenever you have an intervention in the market, you end up having the best for the few who are connected, right? Those who have a license, those who have a special funding mechanism, those who have an inside track with a financial house or connections with a board or a commission, they are the ones who get the favor. If they're big enough, they can get it. If they have the right connections, being smaller, they can get it as well. The loot, you might say, from the operation of the modern state, which is commercial. We don't have limited government anymore. We don't have government. We have the state, the welfare investment capital state, and attaching itself to that gigantic agglomeration of interests, some of which are lawful government. There are many, many players. How in Chattanooga can we have prosperity by the operation of the free market? Well, I think in the housing sector, we've lost control in many ways of local economy. And we have, of course, waiting in the wings perpetually with among people with a long view. We have Thrive 2055, which is working to find collaborators and parties who are sympathetic with this goal of centralization of another company, another layer of government, which they envision would cover 3 states, 3 different nations, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia, aggregating around, I think, 16 counties or so here in southeast Tennessee area. Well, that's the goal of Thrive 2055 is to make lobbying more efficient. In the end, it's a mechanism for gaining more federal money, the free money from the good people, and separating away from local interest, parochial, the parochial interest of the voter, getting a layer of management between the voters who are already half asleep and have dozed off, and those people who want to make things happen, right? Those people who are the shakers and the movers, the planners, the planner types. We have in Chattanooga also the coming controls from the Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington through a new stream of grants. These are community block grants. They're called AFFH, and it's a mystery right now what that means, but we can find out if you just hang on. This is David Tulis, and I do thank you for giving me a couple of minutes of your time here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, Noogaradio.com online, and of course on YouTube at Hot News Talk Radio, and you can hear us live on your PC or your personal device, your laptop at by the TuneIn Radio app, or just online at very conveniently Noogaradio.com. And we want to investigate this question. I want you to think with me right now about how we have increasing efficiency in the market. Efficiency is never brought about by intervention, especially intervention by non-market players, and that would be those attached to the state, or those who are half in the state and half out of the state, with perhaps a public-private partnership, which is the popular vehicle today, where commercial government and profit-seeking interests do a great thing. and that is to offload risk to the taxpayer, that's you, and onload profit to themselves. In other words, they make public the risk and they make private the gain. And that is the general dynamic of modern American debt capitalism. Also, you could call it, if you're trying to be mean about it, you could call it crony capitalism. But crony capitalism is a very unique thing. It's a worldwide phenomenon. I'm reading a Robert Kaplan travel book before I go to bed every night, and he talks about how in Africa, according to one writer, the writer passed 50 checkpoints at each of them were armed and badly worn soldiers demanding to search the Volkswagen bus's passengers' bags and having their hands out. So with one hand, they would search your personals, and with the other, have an open palm, a white, very dark black man with white open palms, saying, "Give me the money." Well, that is a kind of the skimming economy of battered Africa that he is writing about, I think, in the late 90s, that particular volume. And it's about the breakup of countries and how countries and nation states have become increasingly irrelevant. And Africa is the location in which he notices this. And what happens rather are population movements, tribal interests. And right now I'm reading about the Kurds who occupy 5 or 6 countries, including Iran and Turkey. And they are a unique people, even though there are several tribes among them. They are a unique people. And the borders which divide them are ludicrous and irrelevant, and increasingly so in the decades ahead. This decline of the state will become more evident. Geopolitical forces take effect. Here in Chattanooga, we can hope for things like that. Let's hope for the next 40 years there will be these kinds of changing of perspective, a changing of consciousness as the nation state, which has worn out its welcome with 1 billion deaths or so in the 20th century, caused by war and starvation and deliberate policy. The nation state has lost its place and its mooring as an idol among people of our generation, and that's why people don't vote anymore. There's nothing exciting about the public life, right? Civic life has no interest, and it doesn't seem to matter, and so the state is going by the wayside. Let's hope, for the purposes of liberty, that we can take advantage of it, and that we can see. I'd like to suggest that we can see how to take advantage of it. But here in Chattanooga, the housing market is in a mini boom. There's a construction boom going on. We are in a bubble, and the establishments being built are coming from minds and boards and groups of men. Their aspirations and their hopes fueled by debt. The fact that they have obtained easy money, easy financing from national entities, beating out the local players. Of course, these are all national remote companies coming in to build speculative buildings for which there is not a market. Right, we're in a boom, and there is not a market for these buildings being built all around Chattanooga. It is a bubble, but we have that aside. Now that part of the housing market aside, we're talking about affordable housing. That is something that's coming up in the campaign. Larry Groen, the Republican conservative, mentioned it when he announced he's running for office, and Andy Burke has made noises about it. Though I must say I have not been able to reach Andy Burke's office. I've called, I think about 5 or 6 days in a row now, Lacey Stone, the PR person, and she's not calling me back. Here I am. I run a radio station, and I'm a writer and a journalist, and I can't get the main PR person for the mayor to get back to me. But from what I recall having read in the press, the Chattanooga Time-Free Press, and the Chattanoogan and other of our main sources of local news, that is an interest of Andy Burke, the Democrat. Affordable housing. Well, affordable housing is not possible if you have regulation and intervention. There are barriers to affordable housing, barriers to cheap housing. My wife, Jeanette, last night was upset with me when I mentioned what I was going to talk about today. This was at the dinner table. My mother sat on my left, and my son sat, the last child at home sat on Jeanette's right, and I'm kind of at the head of the table, right, as the dad. And I said, well, I think I'm going to kind of argue for shanty towns. And she was shocked. She was upset that I would say that and that I would propose that. But in effect, the idea of the shanty town, the idea of the Chinatown are alike. Now, Chinatowns, which you find in many cities around the country, are shabby. They're very shabby. They're very close. The buildings are old. Modifications are being done on them, often privately, right, outside of public notice, and they're run down. But in places like that, and in shanty towns, which you find all across the world, Robert Kaplan in his travel book just has these steamy, rubby scenes of shanty towns held together with wires and boards and sheets of corrugated aluminum with tires on top to keep the structure from blowing away in the wind. Those are all around the world, and they are a sign of degradation, right? But on the other hand, they are a way for people who are very poor, who have little money coming in, to maintain warmth. And in let's see, what was it? Egypt. In Egypt, the shanties are remarkably, especially in the southern part of Egypt, on the upper part of the Nile. The shanties look awful on the outside, but inside they're spick and span. He says it's incredible how ugly and fantastic they are. Rickety they look from the outside, but inside they are very well kept, very well ornate, as if they were palaces. So you can't believe the inside of a home by looking at the outside of the house, right? A home and a house are different things. You buy and sell a house, but you make a home, and that's the point. Real estate people don't, they conflate the two. They don't sell houses, they sell homes. But in fact, you make a home and you buy and sell a house. What are the barriers to cheap housing? Well, I would think that if you had an open market on housing with minimum standards, you would have, again, affordable housing. But guess what? You would have a housing that the priggish people of our town would not care about. For example, John Harris of the Ottawa Citizens for Responsible Growth is one of these people who has a very high view of what is proper and what is right. He's quoted by Dave Flester in a May 2016 story about Mustard Tree Ministries and Barry Kidwell's plans to have a kind of a neighborhood of tiny houses, right, where homeless people can live at hardly any expense. This effort by Mustard Tree was shot down, and some of the people quoted as objecting to this were, I would say, they have a kind of priggish perspective, and he was hoping to build on a piece of property that had a large septic tank being used by a church that had shut down 4 years before. And a woman named Mrs. Petticord, Debbie Petticord, who lives across the road from the project, said the site is perfect for cows and horses. But Dave says that she questioned whether the soil could support 32 more houses on the septic tank system erected by the church. If this is built in my view shed, it will be similar to looking at a trailer park, she said. Okay, well, there you go. You can't have a shanty town or a town or a place that's under-regulated because it might look bad. Well, there you got a problem. And that's people who have a view shed and an understanding of their desire to not behold people who are poorer than them, and who don't have room in their heart to accommodate the visible signs of their poverty or their struggle. Don't forget, people who are poor often are struggling, right? That means they're working to improve themselves. Would it not be perhaps good for someone like Debbie Petticord or John Harris, who also objected to this plan, to say, well, here are people, maybe I can help. Maybe if these people are near me, I can learn to help them. I can learn to find out who they are. We are rather standoffish, though, sometimes. And these people are simply taking, you might say, a national perspective. There's no heart in it. It's always kind of self-centered. And it's understandable. Of course, it's fueled by the media. It's fueled by Madison Avenue. And it forgets the whole premise of local economy. Of course, it doesn't forget it. It never knew it to begin with. It just rejects it. And it rejects it. The main premise of our show here at the David Tulis program is love your neighbor and buy local on AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio on Noogaradio.com. And, of course, on your smart device through a wonderful app called the TuneIn Radio app. You can watch me if you want through YouTube on TuneIn Radio. See, you're not going to like my bow tie today. Look at my bow tie and tell me that David Tulis, that bow tie is a clash and it is an abhorrence. And I'm going to tell Jeanette that you did a bad thing today. You go right ahead. I appreciate you telling her. That way she'll open her eyes when I stoop over to kiss her on my departure, she's there in her bed reading her Bible, and she will actually look at me, look at her husband and check his collar to make sure that it's down in the back, and make sure that she's willing to trouble me on my hasty departure, telling me that my bow tie is simply out of order. Well, the housing market is a shantytown is something I think we need to look at, but whether it's through tiny houses or other, and the cost of a house, and we're gonna look at this today. Okay, we need to figure out how this works, and I want you to hang on for a few minutes with me as we. And I've got other news to get to, so let me try to get to my other news before I explore this topic too much. But just in a nutshell, okay, since I was promising to tell you something, in a nutshell, what are the barriers to cheap housing? Well, there are green building codes. There are limits on the number of people who are unrelated in a house. That's because it's overcrowded and dangerous, right? These are limits. Shanties on abandoned land, and forced empty lots that are seized from people who live there, who build their little hovels there. As seized, or they're cast off, as it happened in a Texas city I was reading about in the Freeman on this point, cast off by a court for development corporations such as the Southeast Development District, and the forbidding of homesteading on vacant or abandoned lots. Now, homesteading is where people invest in a piece of property that's abandoned. They make their own little house. They cobble it together. They maybe have a builder help them with parts of it. They get free supplies. They get cast-offs. They build their house at minimal expense. Think about building a house for $10,000 with cast-offs, and for yourself, right? You're building it for yourself. Well, once you have the city inspector coming in, such as Dallas Rucker and his staff in city government, well, that's going to be shot down. So no, you cannot build your own house. You cannot have a house that doesn't have all these amenities. The amenities come from the good people, the people who are better than you or better than me. But the practical consequence of rules like this and limits on occupations is that poor people who might otherwise be able to make easy money on their own and be able to have affordable housing are legally forced off. They're forced out of driving taxis, of doing running illegal businesses and things like that, and living in illegal houses. If they're not able to do that, sorry, you can't live here because the minimum prices are too much for you. So what we have then is an inhospitable city. Wasn't Gomorrah judged for buggery and sodomy? But wasn't Gomorrah, and we're not also Sodom, judged for their inhospitality as well as sodomy and buggery? Well, yes, they were. So we want to think about what hospitality means. And I think hospitality means being able to have less intervention so that you can have more of a marketplace, a free market where there's no visible hand, whether cloaked in velvet, an iron hand cloaked in velvet, or an iron hand cloaked in steel that looks tough and looks mean and sturdy, right, and formidable. Either way, not good for the poor. This is David Tulis, and we're making note of Food City presenting $100,000 to. Here we have again sort of AstroTurf local economy, where the man in business finds a way of being charitable. Food City presented, according to David Carroll, TV3. You shop and you get credit. So what happens is Food City gets people to shop in its pricey stores. And when they do, they register their school and they get an ID, and there's a connection between your little tag which you have scanned for the little freebie back, a little bit of credit, little points. That Food City value card barcode alerts the system of a corresponding school to credit with the purchases, making points easy and quick. So for every time you shop at Food City, your school gets a little chit. And at some point, there'll be a check following the chit, the digital chit. To date, Food City, David says, has awarded more than $17,200,000 in much-needed educational equipment and tools. We've read this week of Chief Justice Roy Moore in Alabama is being thrown off of his court and by a usurpacious act. Usurpacious is a word that Lee Anderson used to use in his editorials in the old News Free Press and in the later Chattanooga Time Free Press. The usurpacious operations of a court, and who has a political ideology behind its actions. They're making him out to be a martyr, says a Republican strategist telling AL.com, the Alabama newspaper. To the average voter, especially to the average Republican primary voter, he's fighting for an issue they believe in traditional marriage. And I think this helps him. I think it's going to make him stronger if he does run for governor, believe it or not. And there's a good quote in the story that the suspension of Governor Moore, Judge Moore, he can say that he stuck to his convictions, a quality that appeals to voters in a political climate that favors authenticity over establishment politicians. By being once again thrust into the national spotlight, Moore's already sky-high name recognition can only grow. Do we really want help from the good people and their hardcore, hard-bitten, self-glorifying humanism? And I'd say we wouldn't. And here, if you look at a story in alternative media, mediasyndicate.com, a story picked up from The Intercept, you'll say, the good people who tortured a Tunisian al-Najjar, the good people really should be doubted. And that's one of my goals here, is to help you have more sense of loving your neighbor and buying local, more of the sense of near is better than far and small is better than big, but also to doubt the good people and their ministry of mercy. Al-Najjar was arrested in 2002, seized, and this story says that he was doubled over and chained his wrists to his legs. They put a bag over his head and inserted something into his rectum, he recalled. 2 months after he was transferred to the salt pit, Afghan detainee Rul Gul Rahman was tortured to death there by the good people, by our federal people, dragged outside of a cell, stripped naked, beaten, and repeatedly immersed in cold water. After being put in an isolation cell overnight, he died of hypothermia. And internal CIA investigation said, well, he died because he didn't have his dinner, because that could have been a source of fuel to keep him warm. Well, Al-Najjar's interrogators would hang him from the ceiling for 24-hour periods, his wrists strapped to a metal bar over his head and his toes barely able to touch the ground. And he was in this position, and the guards would beat his legs and his back with a baton or punch him in the kidneys. They would shine a light in his face. He was fed every third day. He was forced to wear a diaper and changed much less than your newborn every fourth day. And he was told that his family was being threatened, that there were vague threats to produce a, quote, mind virus that would cause Al-Najjar to believe abuses would worsen until he cooperated. And these are the people who run HUD, okay? The same people who run HUD are the people who tortured this man, who still has problems. He has chronic pain in his ankle, though he is free now, his hips and his backbone, kidney pain, hernia, and blood in his stool. The story mentions from The Intercept also another man, not guilty of anything, not proven guilty, just arrested and given abuse. We're here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, wanting more for a local economy and free market. I've got someone I want you to meet, an expert, a local expert on housing and how the housing market has not Adam Smith's invisible hand, but a very heavy hand with knotted knuckles and very awkward fingertips. This is David Tulis.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Here's what advertisers are saying about AM 1240. HotNewsTalkRadio.com.
Radio station, they really care. They're always calling me probably once a week, checking on me, seeing how things going, see if they want to change any of the ads or do anything different, seeing what my needs are. I've gotten business off the ads that you do for me, and seems to be working well at this point.
Prices were very fair. Areas in this town that we aren't able to get other ways, your radio station is able to help us out, and I really appreciate that.
We've been very pleased with the services we've got. It seems like everybody over there cares about what they're going to do, how it's going to work for us on this end. And we've been very impressed with the creativity of the ads that we've heard. And they always seem to be right on point, even without us having to come up with what's going to be said.
Been doing business with News Talk Radio for quite some time. It's the best place and the best value you can get for your advertisement. The commercials are great. They're very professional. I was actually blown away.
The commercial that they put together was awesome. It was way far above all the other radio stations we've dealt with. The best we've had yet, guarantee you, by far.
AM 1240 HotNewsTalkRadio.com gets results. Let us get results for your business. For no obligation free consultation, call General Sales Manager Steve Johnson. Call 423-240-5459. That's 240-5459. Or you can always email Steve at NougaRadiosteve@gmail.com. That's NougaRadiosteve@gmail.com. AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We get results.
The NASCAR racer's ideal is quality and excellence. So is mine. Hi, David Tulis here. My pit crew is S&S Auto Repair. I've taken Toyotas and Hondas to S&S for 13 years, even though it's way out of my way. I like being treated fairly, like a neighbor. S&S specializes in Toyota and Lexus, Honda, Acura, Scion, Nissan, and Infiniti. Make an appointment today and get a free 4-inch combat knife as a gift. 855-3436. ssautorepair.net. 855-3436.
You used to call me on my cell phone.
When you crack your screen, mess up your charge port, you get soaked in a rainstorm, what do? Save money, save big, fix it, get surgery. There's a cell phone hospital near you. It's the Cell Surgeon. Adam Disbro, the man in white, he replaces your screen, fixes your buttons, gives you back Twitter, Facebook, your online universe. Walk-in patients go to Cell Surgeon in Ottawa. Cell Surgeon is new in Ottawa, next to Zaxby's. Other docs in the cell repair business are just lab coats. The doc at Cell Surgeon is the best. He wants you to be happy, fix your phone, save money, and save time. Every minute is valuable, and Cell Surgeon doesn't want to waste a second. Your wireless MD, the Cell Surgeon, quick and precise with your device. Takes an hour or less. Northgate Mall, Cell Surgeon next to Old Chicago Pizza, 900-8263, thecellsurgeon.com. Like him on Facebook.
You used to call me on my... You used to.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. It started out as what would have been a normal marijuana purchase in Chattanooga, but ended with a broken foot and a machete attack. A young man was walking home from school after being dropped off by a bus when he saw a red car with 3 men inside of it. The 3 men offered him marijuana. He gave them money. And when he did, a man jumped out of the car with a machete and demanded the rest of his money. He handed it over. 2 men jumped out of the car, picked him up, and threw him to the ground, shattering his foot. The young man apparently knew the man with the machete and picked him out of a photo lineup. Dante Miller, who's 20 years old, is now charged with aggravated robbery. An update now on that hit and run on Highway 153, where a Hispanic man was found dead in the road. It's been found out that he was hit by a 22-year-old motorcyclist, a student. Police do not believe that the initial wreck is the fault of the motorcyclist, but leaving the scene of the accident is a crime. Former Spring Hill police officer Christopher Odom has been arrested and indicted after multiple allegations came forth that he groped women during traffic stops. He's been arrested and charged. $75,000 is his bond. It was going on in the Tennessee Valley. It's going on Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
Warming up out there through your afternoon with mostly sunny skies, highs 83 to 85. Tonight, a little milder under fair skies, lows closer to 60. For the midweek, continued warm and dry. Lots of sunshine out there through Thursday with highs each day into the mid-80s. Did you know that you could purchase a home now with little or nothing down? Find your dream home now with McBriar Realty. Call McBriar Realty at 706-657-2353 or McBriarRealty.com. And I'm Source 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Hoare. On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Yeah, we got it. This is David Tulis. We are here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, loving our neighbors and urging you to buy local, buy cash. One of the things I plan to implement is a Cash Friday. Once a month, we will have a day where you and I will go and get a $100 bill or 250s or 520s from the bank. And we're going to celebrate cash because cash is freedom and cash is, as they say in London, privacy. the privacy of your your transactions. We are here in Chattanooga. The name is David Tulis, and thank you for joining me, giving me just a couple of minutes of your time as we figure out how it is true that near is better than far, and small is better than big, and simple than complex. And of course, there are two other nostrums which I, your local economy guru, propose as we try to build out in our minds the idea of sustainable freedom and liberty. And these are, I say sustainable freedom because there's a Sustainable Freedom Lab here in Chattanooga. We here in Chattanooga have our own sustainablefreedomlab.org, if you want to look it up online, run by a longtime former executive and a writer. And his name is Sean Hannity, and his expertise, he is a real national expert, is the loss of suppleness, of flexibility, of real pricing in the housing market. He is a specialist, and Sean Hannity, explain to my listener what is wrong with a HUD heavy hand that's called AFFH. What on earth is that about? What's going on?
David, thank you for having me on this morning. Yeah, HUD's Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing is a new rule that was passed. I need you to understand, Sustainable Freedom Lab is about helping local communities protect their property rights and their local authority, because right now, both of those are under attack by the federal government. And we've seen different ways in which the government steps in to take over. Now, you've probably seen it and felt it and touched it in the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act, if you go to a doctor, all of a sudden, they're going to ask you specific questions that have been established by the federal government. They don't get to ask the questions they want. So you may go to the doctor and they'll ask you about, do you have guns at home? Do you feel anxious or nervous or depressed? How often a week do you feel depressed? And you begin to accumulate all this data. Well, where does that go? That goes into an EMR, an electronic medical record system, that basically then goes up to Health and Human Services. So we've nationalized that. We've nationalized our education system. When children take these standardized tests, which we do in Tennessee, in spite of all the changes, nothing really has changed. That information goes up to the Department of Education, which shares it with Health and Human Services, which shares it with the IRS. And from there, it can go to the Department of Homeland Security and so on and so forth. So we've nationalized our medicine and delivery. We've nationalized our educational system in America. But right now, through HUD, we're in the process of nationalizing our local zoning and local authority. Now, we all know that the United States operates on a system where it's supposed to be a bottom-up kind of a government, where local authority is in charge. That's what helps us to be economically viable. That's what helps us to have variety and competitiveness from each of these different incubators, like one state to another. So we have to have the prominence of local authority. Well, HUD's new ruling, Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, begins to turn all of that on its ear through grant money. When the grant money comes in under that program, there's certain restrictions that are attached to it. And those restrictions can actually override local voters' decisions, as it's done in communities like Rockford, Illinois. It can override local zoning laws, and it can even replace, in some cases, local authority. Now, the reason I travel around the country doing this, it's not just an economic issue. And of course, obviously, especially in your program, economics is extremely important. We try to forewarn citizens to be ahead of what's happening. Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing and HUD's encroachment on local authority is something that if you wait for it to happen to see how you're going to react, it's already too late. You have to do something before it's happened. Now, let me explain how this gets into your communities, how it affects pricing, how it affects local zoning authority. For years, communities have been taking HUD grants. In fact, so has Chattanooga, Tennessee. Just in 2016, they took a $1.6 million community development block grant. They also took another $150,000 from emergency solutions grants. They've taken almost $1 million through the home grant. So Chattanooga has been the recipient of these grants. Now, typically over the years, this has been a fine thing. You know, HUD has provided grants to enable communities to build affordable housing to take care of some of the less fortunate members of our community. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing is a term that has been around for decades. There's been nothing wrong with that. But here's the catch. It's never been particularly well enforced. They never had HUD never had an enforcement mechanism. Well, now they do. That enforcement mechanism is lawsuits. So what they've done is created a ruling now called affirmatively furthering fair housing. So when you talk to your public official and he or she says, well, wait a minute, we've known about AFFH, we'll call it that for simplicity. We've known about this for years. There's nothing new here. What are you talking about? What I'm talking about is a new rule that has redefined what it takes to meet HUD's obligations. They've redefined what the Fair Housing Act is. They've redefined what civil rights is. They've redefined what discrimination means. And now they pushed us into a position where we're going to begin re-engineering communities all around some centrally designed program in the name of eliminating discrimination by virtue of affirmatively furthering fair housing. So now in communities across the country, like for instance, Westchester County, New York, they put up affordable housing, but the government came in after a lawsuit and decided, well, we don't like where you're putting those houses. We think your house has to be in a nicer area. So let's suppose we had affirmatively furthering fair housing. We purchased some money under affirmatively furthering fair housing, got some grant money under AFFH right here in Chattanooga. And we decided to put up some affordable housing. But HUD said, well, now wait a minute. We need to have a thing called income integration. We need to be sure that we don't have all these low-income houses in one area. That's called a concentrated area of poverty. And in fact, you have those right here. If you go on HUD's website under AFFH tools, you're going to see a map of Chattanooga if you look up Chattanooga. And you see this kind of little pink outlined area. Well, that's what they call a concentrated area of poverty. And it starts around East 45th Street, right around the Tennessee, Georgia border down there, goes on up to Macaulay Street and over to the Tennessee River and kind of zigzags around. But according to HUD, because too many low-income African-American families live there, you may well find your community in a position where you have to relocate that affordable housing or provide them with vouchers and put them into nicer areas, like maybe East Brainerd or maybe up on Heavenly Way, a beautiful home, a beautiful street up there on East Brainerd. Now, that's not a plan. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just kind of speaking theoretically here. But HUD has the ability now to do those things, and it's all through this program called income diversity. So it's no longer about just putting up an affordable housing. So if you think, well, we have a program here and 20% or 30% or 40% of new development that goes up has to be affordable, it's not going to exactly work that way. HUD can decide where they want that affordable housing to go. And let me give you an idea of one of the extremes. In New Salem, New York, HUD decided that they wanted affordable housing in an area next to homes that started at $700,000 and went up to about $4.7 million. So I drove up there. I went to New Salem, and sure enough, there it is. You have these $150,000 homes. I mean, they're nice. It's a little like a condominium complex there. $150,000 homes next to an $800,000 ranch with 20 acres of land. Now, the people that they had to put in there didn't want to move because they lived in the city. In that case, the city was in the Bronx nearby. They didn't want to move up there because they had all their friends. So what's happening is HUD forces people to move into these newer, upscale, more affordable areas. Now, how do they force them to? They decrease the amount of vouchers they were giving them in the existing home that they're in, and they increase the amount of money they pay for the voucher in the new home. That's under a new program that they have called small area marketing values. So all of a sudden, we're just kind of moving people around in the community. We're shoving them around, and we're re-engineering and redesigning what your community is going to look like. Now, what's that going to do to your price of your home if you've worked really hard for your lifetime and you now got this home that's worth, I don't know, $700,000, $800,000, $1 million, or whatever your level of success has been able to accomplish? Suppose you have that, and all of a sudden HUD says, well, you know what? You are what we call, are you ready for this? An opportunity-rich neighborhood. So what we're going to do is an MTO. MTO is we're going to move to opportunity. So we're going to take that person who was living on East 45th Street, and I'm sure there's lovely homes on East 45th Street, but I'm just kind of giving you a boundary there. We're going to take somebody who we had in an affordable home there, and we're going to move them into that right next door to that $1 million home. Do you think that might depreciate the value of the $1 million home?
I do.
Well, HUD says it won't. HUD will produce all kinds of statistics that say it won't reduce the value, but realtors produce statistics that say, well, yeah, it actually does reduce the value. So I think the message here is we not only have to be prepared, there's certain things that we as a community have to be listening for if we're going to protect ourselves against this onslaught of HUD. Number one, and the most important, is you have to find out where's the money coming from. If your town council, your city council, or in the case of Hamilton, the county council, if they decide to take money, what is the fine print? Are there strings that are attached to that money? For instance, one thing we've discovered when you take these HUD community development block grants, there's a definition of what it takes to affirmatively further fair housing. Now let's remember, whoever accepts that money signs a piece of paper. They sign their name on the dotted line and they say, we agree to do nothing that is materially inconsistent with HUD's goal of affirmatively furthering fair housing. That's legalese. It's binding. If you do something materially inconsistent, then all of a sudden you're in defiance of the law. So you could have to return the money or even face more expensive lawsuits. Well, let me tell you what it means now to affirmatively further fair housing. And I hasten to add, it's so important to understand this. It did not mean this a year ago.
We are talking with John Anthony of Sustainable Freedom Lab. His website is sustainablefreedomlab.org. He is a national expert, speaks all around the country in places such as Nashville, Knoxville, Richmond, Long Island, Seattle, and Crossville about the threat of HUD. So, John, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to read. I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's way too long-winded, but this is just about half of HUD's definition of what it takes for a community to affirmatively further fair housing. Now, here it goes. It means taking steps proactively to address significant disparities in access to community assets, to overcome segregated living patterns, and support and promote integrated communities, to end racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty, and to foster and maintain compliance with civil rights and fair housing laws. Now, is that a mouthful? Try to put a measure on one word that I said. We have words in there like overcome segregated living patterns. How do you do that? Address significant disparities. What are disparities? What is significant? If HUD comes down on you after taking this money, taking grant money,
right, after you take the money, after your town takes
after your not you personally, but if your community has taken the HUD money, and then HUD comes in and says, well, wait a minute, we don't think you've taken enough of a move to significantly reduce disparities in your community, how are you going to win an argument against that?
Are you saying that this injects a kind of bureaucratic caprice and arbitrary will in local affairs that it didn't have before?
Capriciousness is a good word for it, yes. And that's exactly what happened. Every single community that's faced the lawsuit, a HUD lawsuit based on this Fair Housing Act in the last 4 years has lost. They've never been able to win. So what they do is they just cave. They say, okay, fine, what do you want us to do? That's where you surrender everything.
Are these lawsuits brought by activist third parties or the Justice Department?
Good point. They're brought in the most part, and they were intended to be brought by activist third parties.
Like intervening parties, ex-rel type of parties.
They're ex-rel.
Acting on behalf of somebody else.
Yes, that's precisely what happened. In Baltimore, Maryland, a few years ago, 3 HUD residents, people who lived in HUD affordable income housing, they decided that they didn't like the area they lived in. They thought they really ought to be living in a nicer, more upscale area. So they went to the local NAACP. And together, 2 civil rights groups and these 3 HUD residents went to HUD. And HUD, in turn, went back to the county and they sued them. They sued them for disparate impact.
Was the moving party HUD in that case?
Yes. So HUD came forward. They took it to court, but guess what? Everybody just settled, so there was no problem here. And Baltimore County completed a voluntary compliance agreement. Now, I love the word voluntary because guess what would happen if they decided not to go along with a voluntary compliance agreement? But anyway, they filled out this agreement, and it said they had to come up. Baltimore County had to come up with $30 million to build 1,000 new homes. But what's most interesting is the courts decided where those homes would be. And they decided they had to be in the more affluent areas of the community. So it wasn't good enough just to build more affordable housing. They had to build it in upscale communities. Meanwhile, and this is most important, those 3 people that brought this settlement, they shared the settlement with HUD, they shared in a $150,000 fee. So they all got, what do you call it, a payout from this. So they all got their about approximately $50,000 a piece. Plus they got moved
damages.
In damages. Plus they got moved into their new homes. Everything was paid for, and they even had the costs of utilities and so on the first month. All that was paid for. In New York, when Westchester County, New York, a group, a small civic organization, sued Westchester County for failure to accommodate affirmatively furthering fair housing. In that case, it was a False Claims Act lawsuit. They walked out with, are you ready for this? $7.5 million. So all of a sudden, if you take HUD grant money, you may be setting your community up for a lawsuit. Now, again, I hasten to add what I'm saying. A lot of public officials say, "Oh, well, that's silly. How can this be happening? We've been taking HUD money for years," and that's true, and I'm very well aware of that. But if you fly up to 30,000 feet and you look across the United States and see what's happening, HUD started more legal actions in 2011 than they had in the last decade combined. That's 1 year alone. Now we have an election year, so HUD doesn't want to make a lot of noise right now. So you don't hear a lot of this going on. But as soon as the election is over, especially if Hillary Clinton were to get in office, and I'm not saying one candidate over another, I'm not going down that road. But if Hillary Clinton gets into office, she's going to be on steroids with this, because the head of HUD, by the way, was one person that she had initially chose to be her running mate, Julian Castro.
This is David Tulis. We're talking with John Anthony of Sustainable Freedom Lab. Also, it's online at sustainablefreedomlab.org. Well, the question, John Anthony, is this: how is it that what needs to be in the heart of local officials to say no? There has to be something that's not there now. What is there now, and what needs to be in their mind and in their sense of order to help them not make these grant applications or take the money that comes from them?
Well, of course, it's the obvious sense of we want to protect our communities and our local authority. We want to take care of the future. Just building an affordable house is not going to take care of the future. The other thing we have to be aware of is that the game has changed. Money that we used to take on a routine basis, you can no longer accept on a routine basis. We have to be very careful with what we accept. That means we have to read, and we have to look at what the potential downsides might be. And the third thing we have to do is find other ways to build affordable housing. Find other ways to maintain and manage the projects that are in communities. For instance, I go into communities and I find out that very often the amount of money they're getting from HUD isn't even 1% of the budget. And yet they're willing to sell the future, their authority, and the rights of the voters and property rights, all for maybe 3/4 of 1% of the total budget. We're helping communities right now find other ways to come up with the money so they don't have to be dependent on
Can
HUD.
you tell us a success story, John Anthony?
Yes, we've done this out in Castle Rock, Colorado, where right now the community is getting together and they're forming. They're working with a foundation to raise money from on a nonprofit basis. So instead, they've already turned down the HUD grant. They said, we realize that the risks are far too great for our community here. So now they've looked at a combination of reducing their budget a little bit and at the same time raising money on their own. And they project that they will actually be able to raise more money through nonprofit organizations and matching funds through local corporations than they would have ever gotten had they just taken the HUD money. And they don't have the risk, and there's no taxpayer increase.
Well, another thing I think we need to talk about is the mechanisms by which well-intended people, often the high-minded folks in a city or a county or in a region, have the idea that we must have more regulations, creating an ostensible benefit for the buyers of new houses. So new houses have prices that are way above what they could be, way above what the marketplace would have them if there were a free market in housing. In a nutshell, John Anthony, would you say that that regulations with some pretended benefit raise the cost of housing in Chattanooga, make affordable housing elusive here?
Yes, it's going to rise the cost. We've got charts. In fact, I can make them available. They're on my website, sustainablefreedomlab.org. But yes, those regulations, sometimes they're necessary, but very often they're unnecessary. Paul Krugman of the New York Times, following the housing bubble in 2007, 2008, said that it was the regulated homes in which the housing prices went up the most, and those were the ones that created the biggest problem.
And what we want to ask ourselves is there any benefit in the idea of a completely unregulated sector of town that is a free market in housing, where you have houses that have The only requirement is electrical and plumbing, and those minimum for public safety and nothing else. What would happen to the housing crisis in Chattanooga if we had such a district, a free market district? You could call it a shanty town, because they might not all look fancy, but there might be something there. Let's think about that. We're talking with John Anthony, an national expert on housing at sustainablefreedomlab.org. This is David Tulis, and you are at the only place that matters, at the show for the man who matters, the David Tulis Show. Check out Nooganomics.com today.
Over? Did you say over? Nothing is over until we decide it is. Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? No.
German? Forget it, he's rolling.
And it ain't over now. Because when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Who's with me? Let's go. Come on.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. News Talk 1240. AM 1240. Hot News Talk Radio. With your chance to win $124 in cash and $124 in food every week with the Hot News Talk Radio 1, 2, 3 NASCAR contest. Hot News Talk 1240. All you have to do is guess who's going to be first, second, and third place in the upcoming NASCAR Sprint Cup race. If you guess it, you'll hear your name live Monday morning at 11:30. Then call AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio to win. Enter your guess right now at Rick Davis Golden Diamonds, 5301 Brainerd Road, Chattanooga. Diesel off-road technology, Saudi Daisy. For your four-wheel drive and truck needs. Stuff and upholstery with premium rubber foam. Amigos Mexican Restaurant next to Staples and Hickson. Drink specials during the race. Cell Surgeon, the Broken Screen Doc. And Shooter's Supply, 4824 Hickson Pike in Hickson. Hot News Talk 1240. Enter your guesses now and listen to the race live to win $124 in cash and $124 in food from Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station. Hot News Talk 1240.
I love NASCAR.
Time for the Scenic City 6th Annual Open Car Show, Saturday, October 8th. And Hot News Talk Radio is going to be there. Come on out from 9 to 3 exact speeds. 4315 Highway 58 in Chattanooga. Registration fee only $20. And once you get registered, you'll get a goodie bag and a ticket for one of 75 fantastic prizes with a grand prize of a small block 350 crate engine. It's the Scenic City 6th Annual Open Car Show, Saturday, October 8th at Zaxby's. Highway 58 Chattanooga. There'll be specialty awards, People's Choice, and Best Sound Exhaust Awards.
Come on, boys. Rev those engines.
Go to ScenicCityCruisers.com. That's ScenicCityCruisers.com. Or call 423-704-7017. We'll see you at the Scenic City 6th Annual Open Car Show, Saturday, October 8th from 9 to 3 at Zaxby's, 4815 Highway 58 in Chattanooga for the Scenic City Cruisers 6th Annual Open Car Show.
We're at the Cantina, an Amigos Mexican restaurant. Yes, sir. 2 orders of nachos with beef and beans, 2 beers. Chattanooga loves its Amigos restaurants, but the Amigos in Hickson has something extra. NASCAR, every race. How about a house wine? Really good. Big name beers, just tell Maria what you want. And here at Amigos, margaritas are popular, and it's only $3 all day. If you come here on a race day, Sunday, a Natty Light is only $2.25. Here at Amigos, just during NASCAR, Natty Light, $2.25. Amigos Mexican Restaurant in Hickson. The happy hour is 3 to 9 today and every day. I'd say the atmosphere is festive. Look at that huge TV. It's like being amid the fans under a bright
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
WSDT Saudi Daisy, Chattanooga.
CBS News, I'm Frank Sedapani. Heavy rain fell all night, but fearsome Hurricane Matthew arrived in Haiti with a vengeance at daybreak about 3 hours ago.
We're really starting to see the brunt of this hurricane come now, and it's not looking very good.
The remote southwestern corner of the country is in the direct path of the storm's drenching rain and 145-mile-per-hour winds. John Hannity with World Vision Haiti in Port-au-Prince is getting reports of serious damage.
We're definitely seeing a lot of flooding already. We're seeing houses and cars being washed away. We've already had a couple reports of hospitals and clinics being damaged and destroyed.
Dr. Rick Knabb at the National Hurricane Center says the system could take a run at the southeastern U.S. later this week.
We're confident on this turn to the northwest after it leaves Cuba and Haiti. Unfortunately for the Bahamas, that means their entire island chain could be impacted.
A woman in Nassau, the Bahamas, says her family is ready for whatever comes its way.
Got crackers, spaghetti cheese, some rice, some mackerel, all tin stuff.
Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas could be in the path of the storm. In Beulah, Colorado, a mountain town outside Pueblo, a wildfire is threatening hundreds of homes.
My husband saw the smoke and heard explosions, and then he heard the fire engines, and the smoke was getting terrible.
More than a half dozen buildings have gone up in flames, but no injuries have been reported. Vice presidential candidates Tim Kaine and Mike Pence will meet tonight in their one and only campaign debate. CBS News analyst Leonard Steinhorn tells us what he expects from Pence.
You can rest assured that he's going to bring up all of the raw nerves with the Clinton candidacy. He's going to bring up Benghazi. He's going to bring up the emails. He's going to bring up the Clinton Foundation.
Kaine will have his own talking points.
He needs to go after the issues related to women. He needs to go after the issues related to taxes. He needs to keep Mike Pence and thereby the Trump campaign on its heels.
84% of the people in a new CBS News poll said the running mates would not have a big impact on how they'll vote. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange celebrated the site's 10th anniversary by promising to publish new significant documents relating to next month's presidential election. A wanted man at home in Sweden, Assange spoke from his refuge inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London.
We have on schedule all the U.S. election-related documents to come out before November 8th.
Assange didn't say if that material could hurt either presidential candidate. Tennis star Maria Sharapova says she's counting the days until she can return to the courts. An arbitration panel in Switzerland has cut Sharapova's 2-year doping suspension by 9 months.
For Sharapova, this is the first day of the start of the rest of her career.
Ed McGrogan with Tennis Magazine, Sharapova will be able to play in the French Open next spring. In early trading on Wall Street, the Dow Industrials are up 45 points. This is CBS News.
I'm Nick Soboleski, a Select Quote agent with a true story that could save you hundreds of dollars a year. A woman named Linda just called. Her husband, Ray, has a $300,000 group life insurance policy, but is changing jobs and can't take it with him. Well, I impartially shopped the highly rated term life insurance companies we represent and found Ray, who is 41 and takes medication to control his cholesterol, a 10-year, $500,000 policy for under $26 a month. That's almost twice the coverage for less than half of what he had paid. If SelectQuote hasn't shopped for your life insurance, you're probably paying too much.
For your free quote, call 1-800-457-1337. That's 1-800-457-1337. 1-800-457-1337. Or go to SelectQuote.com. We shop, you save. Get full details on the example policy at SelectQuote.com/commercials. Your price can vary depending on your health, insurance company, and other factors not available in all states.
An American who was detained by Iran for 18 months is suing the Iranian government. CBS News correspondent Vicki Barker has the story.
Among other things, Washington Post reporter Jason Rezaian accuses the Iranian government of subjecting him to torture. Foreign regimes generally can't be sued in U.S. courts unless terrorism is involved. Rezaian's lawsuit argues he was effectively held hostage with the aim of extorting concessions from the U.S. and others, which amounts to terrorism. He's seeking an undisclosed amount of money. Vicki Barker, CBS News.
A memorial service celebrating the life of golf great Arnold Palmer is scheduled to begin an hour from now in Palmer's hometown of Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Palmer died last week at the age of 87. Major League Baseball's second season begins tonight with the Battle of the Birds. The Orioles play the Blue Jays in the American League Wild Card game. The Mets and Giants play the National League Wild Card game tomorrow night.
Listen up, y'all. Ben Phillips, Home Rate Mortgage, 805-9100. I'm in the
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Warming up out there through your afternoon with mostly sunny skies, highs 83 to 85. Tonight, a little milder under fair skies, lows closer to 60. For the midweek, continued warm and dry, lots of sunshine out there through Thursday with highs each day into the mid-80s. Did you know that you could purchase a home now with little or nothing down? Find your dream home now with McBriar Realty. Call McBriar Realty at 706-657-2353 or McBriarRealty.com. And I'm Source 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Moore. On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
Martin Truex Jr. is off the pace, and he is headed to the pit lane. Elliott Powers around the outside. Michael McDowell pops a race front tire. Here's Martin Truex to the bottom. Blaney blocks him off, too. Meanwhile, Chase Elliott went 4 wide on the back straightaway. They're side by side for the lead.
Hear it live on Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station. Hot News Talk 1240. The voice of NASCAR. Live from Chattanooga, Tennessee, it's David Tulis.
This is David Tulis. We are here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We're exploring the need for a local economy and a free market in housing, which does not exist now in many respects that we can see as in light of government intervention through HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We're talking with a national expert on property rights, the protection of property rights. His name is Sean Hannity, and we are hoping that you will stay here for another minute or so to hear what he has to say about this important trend, because affordable housing is going to be an issue in the mayoral campaign. And what is affordable housing? How is the price of a house reduced, right, or a rent to a house reduced so that a poor person can afford it? We're all talking about it. Mayor Burke and challenger Larry Groen, a council member, talking about this. But it seems to me that their solutions or their proposals, if they are having them, are not market oriented, but they're state oriented. What can we do, right? We, the mayor's office, do about making housing more affordable to the poor? Well, the solutions are in the market and taking hands off of aspects of construction and development rather than putting another hand on that process. And John Hannity has been looking to see how the national government, seeking now the housing market, will assert greater control over it through HUD, especially after the election. When things are quiet right now, then that agency is not doing a lot of things to damage the qualm and equanimity of the voting public. But after the election, even if Trump is elected, there will be a resurgence of activity intervening in the market. My name is David Tulis, and our suggestion here at Hot News Talk Radio at Noogaradio.com and on your smartphone at the TuneIn Radio app, and of course at Nooganomics.com. Nooganomics is the website for the man who matters here in town. Our thinking is local economy and free markets. There's just an event mentioned this going on this week. It's a startup week, and it is something today. There's something started at 9. It's already in progress. It's called the Cannonball into Angel Investing, Learning from the Jump Fund. It's been going on for an hour already, and that's taking place at Patton Group. There's a dinner this evening at 6 to 10, potluck dinner at Grand Falloon on 400 East Main Street. And you'll experience a potluck evening of food, stories, and music from around the globe, exploring how the movement of people around the world has shaped music, and conversely, how music can encourage dialogue and resilience amidst displacement and upheaval. That's from a quote from Nooga.com that's giving us a guide to Startup Week. And again, it's all about capitalism, starting a business. There are fine titles that touch on innovation, creating a startup environment in Hamilton County Schools. That was a talk we didn't mention earlier, and others this week here in town. Well, John Hannity, you run Sustainable Freedom Lab. Tell my listener why he should care about this. Who cares that you, former executive, are working in this area of property rights protections? Why should anybody care? How does it affect my listener? What is the work that you're doing at Sustainable Freedom Lab?
Well, thank you, David. The work that I do at Sustainable Freedom Lab is I travel around the country setting up programs to help local communities protect private property rights and protect local authority. And very often I find as I travel to these different communities, they don't understand the value of property rights. They think if you can buy a home and sell a home and you can paint it the color you want, well, I have my property rights. What if somebody comes in and wants to place a conservation easement on that home, and maybe I give up my development rights? That's okay. I still have everything else. Well, it doesn't work that way. The best way to describe property rights is this. Imagine I sold you an automobile, and that car was yours, and you could take it and do what you want. You paid cash, and you have the title. But on the way out the door, I said, wait a minute, there's a little chip in that car, and you see if it drives more than 35 miles in a day, the car engine is going to shut down. So you can only do 35 miles a day. But on Sunday, you can do 350 miles, so that'll kind of make up for it. Well, now, I've just decided how often you get to go visit your grandchildren who might live 50 miles away, not 35 miles away. I've probably controlled how you're going to go about your banking, where you're going to go shopping for groceries, maybe even where your school is going to be and where your vacations are going to be, and how you're going to get back and forth to these places, all by controlling that one piece of your property. So the way I like to put it, and I'm not the first, I think Ayn Rand was the first to say this, but when you lose your property rights, you lose your human rights. There's nothing left to lose after that. That's why they're so precious. That's why we at Sustainable Freedom Lab will go into communities, we'll talk to public officials, and we'll say, look, I know how enticing it is to take that $2 million grant from HUD, but if you take it and you agree that you will affirmatively further fair housing according to their rules, then they're now in a position to force you to change your local zoning, and the local zoning then controls what the properties are going to look like. So through that chain of events, the federal government now controls you. So it's based on that we ask public officials, read carefully before you take the money. And if you're going to sign a document that says, our community will do nothing that's materially inconsistent with HUD's goal of affirmatively furthering fair housing, don't sign it. Walk away and find another way to raise the money.
Well, the defense of Yankee government is that we know better how things work. We have a sense of humanity. We are concerned for the poor. We want them to have advantages. We believe in local economy, and that's why we're going to force groups of poor people to be able to move into your neighborhood in subsidized housing, your neighborhood, which is middle class or upper middle class. You have to accept that because you need to be human. You need to be loving and caring, and we're going to give you the opportunity to do that. In fact, that's the argument. That's an argument I make often, is that my listener needs to care about his neighbor, especially giving social capital. And we talk here at Nooganomics.com and at our radio station about the need for social capital for my listener who's an upper crust kind of person and a man who matters, to look out for poor people around him, that he should go with his teenage son and help the woman 3 houses down who is a divorcee, has 2 jobs and 4 children, and who never changes the oil in her car. He needs to assert his capital for her benefit. And that's, of course, Christian charity. So the defenders of the HUD system would say there are benefits that come to you. We are integrating. We're making local people get to know each other better. We're actually helping the culture of Chattanooga by forcing, with a little bit of inducement and threat, this mixing of peoples and races. We're doing that. Answer that kind of objection, please.
Well, what they do is they talk about diversity. We're talking about income diversity and wealth diversity. But there's a huge fallacy there. I mean, there's a lot of fallacies there. But for one thing, the notion that I can take somebody from a low-income area, living where they can afford to live. When we're talking about a concentrated area of poverty, well, don't you have concentrated areas of wealth? And don't you have concentrated areas of middle class, just like you have concentrated areas of poverty? When we talk about a concentrated area of poverty, what we're talking about is people living in homes where they can afford to live. But we're saying, well, if we take them and put them in nicer homes, then they'll have all the advantages that the people who live in those better homes have. Well, maybe they will and maybe they won't, but there's a piece missing. We worked hard to get to those nice homes. Now, I don't know a lot of your listeners here, but I came from a pretty rough spot. I certainly didn't have much money growing up. And I worked very hard and for years to get to the point that I was able to buy a new car, have nice things, buy a new home, have a little bit of cash in the bank. That took me a long way to get there. But in the process of getting there, I learned things. And part of them were the Christian values that, David, you talked about just a moment. I learned that by helping people, by having a sense of society and social sense, that helps you in your business sense. And you're able then to make that grow. Well, you don't get that when you move somebody from poor to rich just by moving them from one house to another. That's like saying wealthy people drive Mercedes-Benzes. So if we take all the people who aren't wealthy and we get the community together to buy them a Mercedes-Benz and put them in it, then they're going to be okay. No, they're not going to be okay. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail of the fact that the reports that HUD is using prove that, yeah, moving people into better areas might help in some areas, but it's also causing a lot of damage in other social areas of that family that they're moving. But HUD doesn't look at that. It's like any other government agency.
What kind of damages are you talking about?
Well, when you move children who are over 13 years of age, and you move them out of their home, where they're used to living, and into these higher income areas, they tend not to do well in school. The crime rates tend to go up, and they have all kinds of social challenges. So we overlook that. So instead, HUD focuses on the 13 and under. So we don't talk about the 14-year-old or the 15-year-old where most of the problems lie. So what we're doing, again, is we're digitizing human society. We're trying to homogenize people into groups that can be shoved around like chess pieces on a board by the federal government. That's what begins to happen when HUD comes into your community. Now, if you think this doesn't happen, I want you to consider something. When the Affordable Care Act came into being, nobody in America had any kind of government insurance. They never did. And we were all told that it was going to be so much better. We'd save up to $2,500 per family. You could keep your doctor. It would never be a tax. 3 times, President Obama said on national TV, it would never be a tax. Well, what happened with that? All of those things turned out to be dishonest. They weren't true at all. In fact, this thing's running us into the ground. It's on the verge of bankruptcy right now, the entire system. The same thing with Common Core. It was voluntary. No state had to join Common Core if they didn't. But what did the government do? They dangled the stimulus money in front of the states. And they said, if you don't sign here, then you don't get the stimulus money. And all of a sudden, 40-some states signed up, and half of them never even knew what the standards were going to look like. But they were on board already.
Right. They signed before the standards were published.
They were months before the standards were even published. Now we're coming in here with HUD, and we're saying, well, sign on the dotted line and assure us that you will not do anything inconsistent with our goal to affirmatively further fair housing, and everything's going to be just fine in your neighborhood. No, it's not going to be just fine in your neighborhood. Now, this movement of HUD's affirmatively furthering fair housing in your community, and I mean Chattanooga, I mean communities around the country, it's taking place now in this classroom, because in June of this year, HUD had a team meeting with the Department of Education and the Department of Transportation. And at that meeting, they decided that we needed to economically integrate communities to have economic diversification. And the way they were going to do that was set up regional equity assistance centers. There are 4 of them around the country. And those regional equity assistance, if you ever read 1984, a lot of this terminology sounds like it's coming right out of there. Those regional equity assistance centers will assist local communities and the educators in those communities to accommodate the classrooms, to stretch the boundaries, to move the policies and requirements in the community so that you can begin to allow lower income families to sit right next to the higher income families in the same classroom. Because HUD has a report that says if you can go to a better school, you'll get better grades. Well, of course, that's how you're going to get better grades, but generally we work our way into those better communities, or we upskill the teachers in the not so good communities.
In other words, there are organic changes in the way of population shifts.
That's exactly right. And there's nothing organic about, you hit it, David, that's exactly it. There's nothing organic about HUD coming in and re-engineering your community to their own social blueprint.
Here in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, we have non-organic mucilaginous sort of entities such as the Southeast Tennessee Development District. So this mucilage, of course, is glue. And this entity is a quasi-governmental corporation serving a public interest headed by Beth Jones. What does this district do, and how is it a conduit for the free money from the good people, John Anthony, of Sustainable Freedom Lab?
Well, in Tennessee, very often money, whether it's from HUD or the Department of Transportation or where the money might come from, instead of that money going directly into a community, unless you're, let's say in the case of HUD, an entitlement community, which means you're entitled to get the money directly, it goes to the state. And then the state divides that money up through these development districts that are strategically located throughout Tennessee. So basically, they just collect the money that the state gets from the federal government and they hand it down to the different communities. So you'll have meetings with these people. And I think that the thing to keep in mind, I've met several of the people in these districts. They're very these development districts. They're very nice people. They really want to help the community. They are clueless about what's going on in these other areas and these lawsuits that are coming down and how it's ultimately going to affect you. And when HUD meets with these development districts, and again, I hope I clarified that. It's just a conduit for the money. That's all. And
how much money in the past year?
How much money went through
here at Chattanooga?
Well, $1.66 million is coming in 2016 through the Community Development Block Grant, as we mentioned just a little while ago. So yeah, there's a substantial amount of money that comes to these communities. Now, whether that came through the development district or not, or whether they got it directly, because Chattanooga is an entitlement community. But for citizens who live here, it really doesn't, it's a difference without a difference. Whether HUD money gets to Chattanooga directly, whether it comes through the state, through a development district, whether it comes through a public housing authority, if they've accepted that money, then they're responsible to affirmatively further fair housing. Even if they didn't sign on the dotted line and directly apply for it to the federal government, it doesn't matter. They're obligated. Most of these communities that have been sued by third parties for failing to affirmatively further fair housing, most of them didn't directly take the money. It came through some conduit.
We'll have to admit, though, John Anthony, that the controls that come through the federal government are rational and reasonable. It really can't be any other way, right? If you're giving money, you're kind of a donor, you have the authority to direct how it's used. If you were giving a wad to your university from which you graduated, you say, I want this $1 million to be used for the training of minority students in the field of economics or cooking or what have you. That has to be honored. So here, it really a way than it is. Therefore what?
Therefore you have to be cautious when you take the money. You have to understand what those obligations are. I mean, David, you're absolutely right. You know, if I have $1 million and I give it to a community, I think there was somebody who left a bunch of money to a Texas institution or something and said, well, you have to teach history. And they said, well, we don't want the money because we don't want to have to teach history. So you have a right to have strings attached to it. And the government has every right to say, this is what we want to do. And these are the demands that we're going to make if you accept the money. But what's happened in the past, there have not been a lot of demands. Now there are. So it's on the shoulders of the public officials who accept that money now to read the fine print, and the attorneys to say, instead of deciding how do we get the money, maybe we should be deciding, should we even be taking this money?
So in the past years, John Anthony, when the feds didn't ordain what was going to happen, they were effectively wasting their money for their public policy. Now they're smartening up, they're wisening up. They're saying, well, this is money we're giving away, of course, collected from the taxpayers here and elsewhere, and we're going to ordain what has to happen, and these are our rules. So they're
well, whether they're wise, smartening up or not,
value, right?
Yeah, I think that's a stretch to suggest that they're smartening up. They've gotten more greedy is what's happened. As they've given this money out,
they're more calculating.
More calculating, much better word. Yeah, they've become more calculating in it. In 2012, President Obama said that there's the United States has a legacy of segregation and discrimination. And the reason they do that, in spite of all the money that we've given out over the years through HUD, the reason that discrimination persists is because we haven't had enough control at the local level. So in 2015, they decided to take that control when they passed this new rule, affirmatively furthering fair housing. But now the pendulum has gone the other way. Perhaps there was too little control in the past. I mean, that may well be the case. But now there's so much control that you're losing your rights as a local community member.
Right, and you're losing effectively self-determination and self-government. Well, John Anthony, you go around the country talking about socialism in America, and you make it have one of your very interesting points you make is that there's a kind of a parallel economy develops when you have socialism as we have now. I don't think our listeners should be afraid of socialism. He needs to understand how it works and how it has worked for 75 or years or more. What is the idea of a parallel economy when we have the kind type of state capitalism that we have today? What is that parallel economy?
Well, a parallel economy springs up when the major economy is failing the people in some way. So they are faced with, well, how are we going to trade goods? I can't afford meat. I can't afford cars. Is there something we can do to barter? So we begin to set up these alternate ways of trading goods for dollars. But let me explain something about socialism. We have a program right now. In fact, if you go to our website, sustainablefreedomlab.org, I have a 3-part series on called Socialism in America. And I think that the thing we need to understand is socialism is here. It's not like we're this free country. We're not. On most of the charts and graphs and indices of free countries, we're not even in the top 10. America's around 15 or 16. Canada is far more free than we are. New Zealand, Australia, far freer than the United States. But if we take a look at socialism as an entity, the United States right now is a combination of democracy, socialism, and probably fascism. Fascism where the state actually regulates everything. They don't necessarily own everything, but they regulate the means of production and manufacturing and so forth. And that's kind of where we are right now. We're certainly not a free market capitalist society by any stretch of the imagination. So what happens in these societies? And I'm going to try to go real quick. I just got a couple of minutes. When Karl Marx, back in the late 1800s, decided we needed to get rid of capitalism and spread socialism into the United States, he found out that he couldn't because he didn't have class warfare. There wasn't enough. We had classes in the United States, but there was class mobility. We moved from one class to the other class back and forth freely. The biggest mobilization was from the low-income area into the middle-income area. So you can't have socialism when you have class mobility. That, over the years, with a lot of prodding from different presidents along the way, began to slow down. We began to have more definitive classes. One of them in the 1960s, we had these studies on women's studies and black studies. That began to create a problem where we established classes. Today, what you see in America is out-and-out class warfare. You talk to somebody who is a Democrat versus somebody who's a Republican, and in some cases, they almost won't even talk to one another. We live in class warfare. Black Lives Matter is class warfare. So what we've done is made ourselves ripe for takeover by a socialist movement. And in a socialist movement, as it begins to mature, the state controls everything. They control the goods. They control the price of goods. They control meat. They control housing. And it's all established by the state. So if you want to be able to buy something you can afford, what you do is you negotiate a price privately with the state and you sell it privately on the side. But you have to lie to the state about what you want the goods for. And you have to lie to the guy that you're selling to what you paid for it. So what you do is you end up, through this system, creating mistrust. And that's where socialism ultimately ends up, with people distrusting one another. Either that, or they just cave into the system and they become a drone that's part of it. And everyone, with it.
And in that system, John Anthony, everyone is on the take. People pretend to work. We pretend to work, and they pretend to pay us. Was a kind of a wise nostrum in the old Soviet Republic. And no, as you say, no one trusts anybody else. There's not productivity, and there's no more thinking of the other. And that's what really the marketplace requires. Adam Smith talked about self-interest, but really what he discusses in The Wealth of Nations is looking out for the other. And that's what capitalism, genuine capitalism, is. It's you, the entrepreneur in Chattanooga, look out for your customer, and you keep thinking about that customer, how you're going to prosper him, whether it's in a service or the innovation of a good or the improvement of an existing product. It's always other-centric and not me-centric. And socialism and Marxism and debt capitalism of the kind we have today, furthered by public schools, does not teach that.
Yeah, I urge you to go to our website, sustainablefreedomlab.org, and click on the band at the top, and it'll talk about part 3 of Socialism in America, because we're going to have Sunday evening. It's a call-in thing. It's a teleconference. 2 incredible guests who are going to show you how you can actually reverse this trend towards socialism that we have in the United States. The idea of HUD coming into your communities, the idea of Obamacare, the idea of Common Core, this is all socialism, but we can unwind that, and we've got the tools. Actually, our founding fathers gave us the tools to do that. So we're going to show you exactly how we can begin to do that.
We have a call. Caller, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I hope your guest stays at the rest of your show. Quick question. Other than cutting their heads off, which I would prefer, I call them occupiers, but abolition of the Federal Reserve, since they can create as much money as they want to empower themselves, and to fund the federal government by any means possible. Your thoughts on that? I'll listen. Thanks.
Go ahead. That's your question.
Well, I'm with you 100%. You know, yes, I think our problems begin, and end with the Federal Reserve, and this is something we have to audit them and shut this whole system down. The idea that we just can continue to print money and create artificial inflation in this nation so that our dollars become worthless, the people become slaves. There's a reason there's a wage gap in the United States.
We can't fight these things directly, but there are other ways. There are oblique ways of dealing with these problems. This is David Tulis. John Anthony, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
John Anthony runs Sustainable Freedom Lab online at sustainablefreedomlab.org. It's an important website. He lives in Ottawa. This is a local resource and a gem for local economy and the free market here in Chattanooga. My name is David Tulis. We think that physical is better than abstract, and that personal is better than corporate. And the great arguments for local economy, in a nutshell, we can do it on our own, and we don't need your money or your help. You are the good people, but we may be better.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Here's what advertisers are saying about AM 1240. HotNewsTalkRadio.com.
Radio station, they really care. They're always calling me probably once a week, checking on me, seeing how things going, see if they want to change any of the ads or do anything different, seeing what my needs are. I've gotten business off the ads that you do for me, and seems to be working well at this point.
Prices were very fair. Areas in this town that we aren't able to get other ways, your radio station is able to help us out, and I really appreciate that.
We've been very pleased with the services we've got. It seems like everybody over there cares about what they're going to do, how it's going to work for us on this end, and we've been very impressed with the creativity of the ads that we've heard, and they always seem to be right on point, even without us having to come up with what's going to be said.
Been doing business with News Talk Radio for quite some time. It's the best place and the best value you can get for your advertisement. The commercials are great. They're very professional. I was actually blown away.
The commercial that they put together was awesome. It was way far above all the other radio stations we've dealt with. The best we've had yet, guarantee you, by far.
AM 1240, HotNewsTalkRadio.com gets results. Let us get results for your business. For no obligation free consultation, call General Sales Manager Steve Johnson. Call 423-240-5459. That's 240-5459. Or you can always email Steve at nougaradiosteve@gmail.com. That's nougaradiosteve@gmail.com. AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We get results.
We're at the Cantina at Amigos Mexican Restaurant. Yes, sir. 2 orders of nachos with beef and beans, 2 beers. Chattanooga loves its Amigos restaurants, but the Amigos in Hickson has something extra. NASCAR, every race. How about a house wine? Really good. Big name beers, just tell Maria what you want. And here at Amigos, margaritas are popular, and it's only $3 all day. If you come here on a race day, Sunday, a Natty Light is only $2.25. Here at Amigos, just during NASCAR, Natty Light, $2.25. Amigos Mexican Restaurant in Hickson. The happy hour is 3 to 9 today and every day. I'd say the atmosphere is festive. Look at that huge TV. It's like being amid the fans, under a bright sun, but no gasoline fumes, no heat. Stay cool. Quench your thirst. Amigos between Staples and Hobby Lobby. Take the next table to mine. Enjoy the NASCAR race with friend or family here at the Cantina at Amigos Mexican Restaurant. Okay, it started.
Drivers, start your engines.
You used to call me on my cell phone.
When you crack your screen, mess up your charge port, you get soaked in a rainstorm, what do? Save money, save big. Fix it. Get surgery. There's a cell phone hospital near you. It's the Cell Surgeon. Adam Disbro, the man in white, he replaces your screen, fixes your buttons, gives you back Twitter, Facebook, your online universe. Walk-in patients go to Cell Surgeon in Ottawa. Cell Surgeon is new in Ottawa, next to Zaxby's. Other docs in the cell repair business are just lab coats. The doc at Cell Surgeon is the best. He wants you to be happy, fix your phone, save money, and save time. Every minute is valuable, and Cell Surgeon doesn't want to waste a second. Your wireless MD, the Cell Surgeon, quick and precise with your device. Takes an hour or less. Northgate Mall, Cell Surgeon next to Old Chicago Pizza, 900-8263, thecellsurgeon.com. Like him on Facebook.
You used to call me on my... You used to.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. It started out as what would have been a normal marijuana purchase in Chattanooga, but ended with a broken foot and a machete attack. A young man was walking home from school after being dropped off by a bus when he saw a red car with 3 men inside of it. The 3 men offered him marijuana. He gave them money. And when he did, a man jumped out of the car with a machete and demanded the rest of his money. He handed it over. 2 men jumped out of the car, picked him up, and threw him to the ground, shattering his foot. The young man apparently knew the man with the machete and picked him out of a photo lineup. Dante Miller, who's 20 years old, is now charged with aggravated robbery. An update now on that hit and run on Highway 153 where a Hispanic man was found dead in the road. It's been found out that he was hit by a 22-year-old motorcyclist, a student. Police do not believe that the initial wreck is the fault of the motorcyclist, but leaving the scene of the accident is a crime. Former Spring Hill police officer Christopher Odom has been arrested and indicted after multiple allegations came forth that he groped women during traffic stops. He's been arrested and charged $75,000 is his bond. It was going on the Tennessee Valley. It's going on Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
Warming up out there through your afternoon with mostly sunny skies, highs 83 to 85. Tonight, a little milder under fair skies, lows closer to 60. For the midweek, continued warm and dry, lots of sunshine out there through Thursday with highs each day into the mid-80s. Did you know that you could purchase a home now with little or nothing down? Find your dream home now with McBriar Realty. Call McBriar Realty at 706-657-2353 or McBriarRealty.com. And I'm Sports Team 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Hoare.
On AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
A Soviet-style ban has been was proposed yesterday, but Judge Barry Steelman is asking for more time to consider the conceptions of Neil Pinkston, the representative of the state, acting on behalf of the people. He's acting in an ex-rel capacity. Ex-rel means on relation of. And he is, in this one instance, representing the people as a whole. That would be you, my listener, and the others. Ordinarily, in his prosecutions of the evildoers in Chattanooga, Neil Pinkston represents the state, whether these are common law crimes or statutory crimes, for which are, we could say, economic crimes or victimless crimes. In either case, it is always the state that's the victim, even in a murder case in which we have a prosecution that the victim is not the dead man and his family. No, it is the state which is defended, and Neil Pinkston is defending the state. But we are here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, concerned that the Gangster Disciples and the Grape Street Crips and their connections with whom are not gang members are going to be put into a stigmatization by the proposed injunction against, in one district in Chattanooga, in one area, one hotspot, an injunction targeting these private these military-style organizations that are involved in petty crime, intimidation, thefts, and vandalism, and assaults. These are men who need a bit of discipline in their lives, need to have a sense of order, perhaps. And I've been thinking in detail about their future. I want you to know that I've been thinking in detail about these young men, and I'd like to propose a market solution that includes a class in constitutional law that perhaps Heidi Malum or other attorneys here in Chattanooga might be able to teach. It might be a little pro bono project for an attorney to talk with these young men to say how they can have an investment, have a stake in the law. This is a concept I've hasn't quite matured in my mind yet, but I have thought in detail about it. Have people who are outside the law, they are outlaws effectively in this. If this injunction goes through, they're permanent outlaws pursuant to this geographical area. Give them a stake in the law. Because if you start that, if you can defend your constitutional rights and your civil rights against harassment and abuse, well, then you've got a stake, the same stake in the future as do you, my listener. I've got here in the studio Chris Long, who is a retired builder. He built all kinds of subdivisions and houses, big and small, and works now as an architectural consultant and deals regularly with civil engineers, architects, city planners in Colorado Springs, in the Chattanooga area as well. Chris is running for mayor. He's running for mayor and has an interest in asking me or having me ask him some questions about housing per se. Chris, welcome to the show. We hear in the campaign, as reported thus far, that affordable housing is lacking in Chattanooga. We don't have enough houses for the poor. That's what affordable housing means. I think it has come to mean other things, but what's implied at the base is that poor people can't find a place to rent or to buy. Now, you've been a developer and have built many houses around here. Lay out the economic landscape for affordable housing. Why are housing prices high if they're high? Give us the background, please.
Okay, well, it's got a lot to do with local regulation and federal guideline regulation that's come down. It's kind of choking off the growth in our region. They won't allow the free market to get into the affordable housing. Free market has to make a profit. Cost of development now is skyrocketing because of these new rules and regulations. We have the energy model code. We got the ICC building codes. They're all interlocked with each other. We have
what does ICC mean?
International Building Code Congress. And that's globally. It's not no more. We used to have the Southern Building Code here, which was basically in our region. And we went to an international area.
Well, do these codes really make houses safer, better, more affordable? What do they do in the construction? Talk about the construction process.
All right. Well, basically what's happened is the codes went out for a good intention, which is life and safety. So the life and safety part of this deal has its own merits, but what's happened is a lot of things are being implemented into these codes now by special interest people and stuff like this that want to regulate different things that they're trying to sell, and this is driving the price and the cost up. For
be specific in one case.
All right, products has to have a UL listing. Okay, so
Underwriters Laboratory, is that a safety?
Yes,
standard?
that's a safety standard. So you cannot put this in a house. You have to have that in a house, and the building inspector, that's what he's supposed to look for, is a label that says UL, or he won't pass it.
On what? On what parts of the house?
Well, you have stoves, electrical sockets, switches, lights, all that type of thing. Drywall, everything's got a label on it, and it has to be certified, and it has to be through the federal government. So, and these are the guidelines you have to go by. Now, building codes are very complex, but they can be simplified. And what's happening with our development here in our area, what's making it hard for us to do less expensive housing, is because of these regulations, and it just made it too complicated. It can be simplified.
All right, so complication. Are you saying complication adds to the price of the end product?
Yes, and it turns the city hall upside down.
How's that?
Well, because there's so many regulations that's brought in, and they conflict with each other, and nobody can give a straight answer, because if they give an answer about one thing, it leads into another, and it's just redundancy back and forth.
So you have interlocking regulations in which there's some friction in the operation of these rules.
And like like our stormwater, for an example. You'll do a new development. We don't have any we've only issued like 9 permits in the past 18 months in the city of Chattanooga over an acre of land. And the reason that is because of stormwater regulations. Stormwater regulations will put a substantial cost on you. I've sat in countless meetings where this is constantly being a problem, where developers are just walking away and going to other areas. It's just cost prohibitive to build in this area.
John Anthony of Sustainable Freedom Lab says that, I think it's more or less kind of a smart guess, is that regulation adds about 22% to the cost of a house. So if you didn't have most of these rules, the ICC and the energy code, you would have houses that are 25% less, making them more affordable.
Well, we need the ICC codes. There's no doubt about it. We need our UL. How we implement that and go through the process through our local government, how they enforce it, is where the snag is. It's not the code itself. The code itself is a good.
Can you be specific?
Well, give you an example. I'm not exactly pro sprinkler, okay? But We have a special interest group that comes out and says, sprinkler saves lives. Well, there's not one statistic out there or a piece of data that's ever showed that a sprinkler saved a life. You can't find it. Well, they have now pushed legislation now where it's going to be mandatory. And what I've been hearing from my...
Is that a city ordinance?
It's been passed. It's passed in the state of Tennessee that residential housing, all buildings required to have sprinklers.
Seriously?
Yes. But they had provisions in that ordinance or that code that local municipalities can opt out. Chattanooga opt out. Okay. So we don't have the fire department manpower to police such a thing, because that has to be regularly scheduled. Maintenance goes on. It goes on. Up in Franklin, Tennessee, they are pushing the sprinkler issues. There's a lot of houses that have sprinklers up there. It's a requirement. And it's got a lot of bugs, and it's not been really working for what we need to be doing, but it's an added cost. So the stormwater issue, I'll give you an example. You take a 7-acre site. If it's near south of Chickamauga Creek, you have to design for it for a 1.6-inch rain event. A lot of people don't know what that means. That's 1.6-inch rainfall that we have, which we have a lot of that happening in Chattanooga, because we have an annual about 57 inches of rain a year. So this water that runs off your site is measured in cubic feet. So they have a formula that the city provides you that you can calculate how much your stormwater is going to run off. And then they have come up with a fee of $45 a cubic foot. So I'll give you an example. It's a 7-acre lot, say near Hampton Place. You put a 30,000 square foot building on it and put the code minimum amount of parking spaces and greenery around it. When you factor out cubic feet of water it runs off on it, your permit will be $577,000. So if you decide to move downtown, which a lot of builders are doing, you're exempt from this. So you don't have to pay those type of regulations. So it's basically to get rid of the urban sprawl. So we don't have any developments in the outlying areas where we can put affordable housing. Be more than welcome to come there and make it a gated community type thing. And it'd be nice. And it's affordable if we didn't have these regulations on it.
This is David Tulis. We're talking with Chris Long, who is a consulting, an architectural consultant here in Chattanooga and elsewhere. Former builder, has built subdivisions. He's 52, also running for mayor. Chris Long, what is affordable housing, and what would you propose could be a possible rule or policy from the mayor's office that would make this benefit come more readily into view among poorer people in Chattanooga?
Well, everybody wants clean water. I have not spoke to one person that denies that they want to have clean water, period. So what I'm proposing is this $45 cubic foot to be taken off, because it's on a state permit. It's an optional thing. It's not required by the federal government. There's an illusion that it is, but it's not. It's optional. It says right on the permit. So I would take that option. That would free up the market around here itself. Then we'd have a lot more tax-based revenue coming in that we can put towards our local housing problem that we have, and get the local and the private sector working together and put this together, because you got to have both. You just can't depend on nonprofits to build these things, because
What about depending on the marketplace to build cheap housing? Why can't we do that? Why does the mayor have to have a policy on affordable housing to begin with?
That's a question I don't really know. Why would he?
Well, I understand your idea of taking off one provision of these permits that would reduce the stormwater fee and reduce the initial payment that the developer has to dole out to get started. But should it seems to me that we have many, and that's why I'm asking you these questions about what are these rules, what adds to the cost of a house. If John Anthony is right, the 22% added cost on a house from regulations, half of that may be, or maybe 10% of that additional amount might be truly meritorious, such as safe electrical outlets, safe wiring, and plumbing that doesn't leak. I mean, those are the two essentials for safety of the residents, of the occupants of a building. What can we do to make those costs go down? In other words, what can we do as the executive branch to pull back and encourage others in the city to want to pull back from these expenses imposed upon developers like you were?
Well, the codes themselves are not a thing that's costly. Only thing that would be like they would want you to put this extra expensive shunt trip breaker in a house, which nobody likes. They're a pain. They trip all the time. They're arc fault breakers, what they are, and they're very expensive. And they're requiring you to have them always in every room of your house. So if you have an iron and you flip the iron on, it's going to trip that breaker off. So what happens is the owner of the house gets tired of this. He goes down to Ace Hardware and replaces the breaker with a standard breaker. Okay? So that's a problem. But your land development cost is the main catalyst that is holding us back for this type of program that we're wanting to do.
And why is land development cost high? Why is that?
Your stormwater, your sewer, all your infrastructure. We're using old road designs that we've been using for years, hadn't changed. We got new, better technologies out here for road construction. It's a lot more affordable. But the city has not taken the time to investigate that type of thing. And it's been proven, and have it vetted and adopt that as a thing that we can use for development.
So that would reduce prices for land development.
Yes. And that's where your 20% comes in.
What about the idea of gentrification and the reclaiming of rundown neighborhoods? Is that somehow responsible for the unaffordability of housing in Chattanooga?
Oh yes, that's the biggest factor.
What's that about?
Well,
Chris Long.
Well, we got this regentrification program in Chattanooga that's brought in, and it has its good merits. I mean, I don't want to take nothing away from it. Who don't like to have park benches and nice little urban setting, and little shops and stuff like that? But it's pushed on us into like a steroid level of pushing it through. And what's happened is it hasn't looked out for the poor guy, the little guy. It's running them over. And it's geared to get rid of the urban blight, but nobody's taking the time to figure out what to do about the poor person, because they're pushing them out of the inner city because of this type of a program. And we can all work together and solve this problem. It just needs to be toned back a little bit and let the free market handle it. Free market is going to do this better than the government will ever think about doing.
Well, isn't the gentrification program not really a program, but just people saying, I'm going to buy this old house in St. Elmo and fix it up and live in it while I fix it, sell it at a profit, or live here and raise my family? Is that not what's happening? And are those not good things? That
is free market right there at its best, okay? And that's an individual going in there and doing that. Now, if you're forced to go over there because you cannot build anywhere else in this city because it's going to be a lot more costly, then you have to go over there.
You're talking about the spec builder.
The spec builder, yeah. Because you don't have any land scarcity around, and there's no subdivisions going on, so lands become hard to come by. Give you an example: Jenkins Road. Anybody lives in that area? Jenkins Road. You go down through, you have a sparse area. You see all these little fancy new craftsman type houses going up into these older houses in these subdivisions. And what it is people had these older lots that they bought years ago, and they're selling them now. And they're putting these houses, and they're sporadic everywhere. And the reason why you're seeing that is because there's no new subdivision. So, longformayor.com, if they can come over, I'll be glad to explain all that stuff to you on my website.
We're talking with Chris Long, Mayor, Long for Mayor. Is that FOR? Longformayor.com. He's a retired builder and a consultant who deals with civil engineers and architects and city planners. Long career in that field. And we have been discussing housing prices. All right. So Chris Long, give my listener the fact he wants to know, and that is how much does unneeded regulation in your mind add to the price of a house as a percentage?
I would say in our market area, it's probably 25%, if not more.
So that's an interesting figure. Okay. So Chris Long, the architectural consultant, says that 25%, a quarter of the percentage of a new house in Chattanooga, is unnecessary rules and regulations and standards. Chris Long, thanks very much.
Thank you.
This is David Tulis. We're with AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, Nooga Radio Online. That's Nooga Radio Online on your smartphone with your TuneIn radio app. Just make us your favorite and tune in here. My name is David Tulis. We cover local economy and the free market, and we've been talking with Chris Long, longformayor.com. He's running for office and is giving us a remarkable assessment of the cost of extra rules.
Over? Did you say over? Nothing is over until we decide it is. Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? No.
Sherman, forget it. He's rolling.
And it ain't over now. Because when the going gets tough, the toughs get going. Who's with me? Let's go. Come on.
News Talk 1240 AM.